we have the honor to host this event in partnership with Microsoft. We all know that AI is an omnipresent topic here at the WEF, since many years actually, and is often referred to as the backbone of digital transformation. I just want to give one personal experience. In my former life, 3 weeks ago, I was in an organization that was building big accelerators. And the recent development is to use AI to run these accelerators. This was done at PSI. This was done at Slack. Eric, yeah. And the result is that the machine, the computer, finds asymmetric ways to run this extremely complicated machine with several hundred thousands of sensors and actuators, 20–30% more efficient than what we can do. And I bet we will spend many years to try to understand what the solutions of AI was and to learn from this. So this is extremely interesting. And I'm delighted that we have been able to gather such a fine group of experts tonight who will touch upon some of the most relevant and controversial aspects in the current AI debate. Cooperation with industry has a high priority for ETH Zurich, since it is often the origin of innovation and technological progresses. We are convinced that both academia and industry can benefit from true partnerships that reflect the particular contributions. And we are delighted to count Microsoft among our strategic partners. We were able to intensify our cooperation with Microsoft very recently by setting up a new laboratory for mixed reality and artificial intelligence in Zurich. My colleague and ETH professor Marc Pollefeys will tell you more about it later on. Apart from Marc, we will have Eric Horvitz on the podium, who is a technical fellow and director at Microsoft Research. With André Loesekrug-Pietri, we have an expert with experience in many fields of industry. I am particularly interested in hearing what he has to tell us as the speaker of the so-called JEDI. Nothing to do with some movies, right?
My name is a saber, if you want.
Okay. And, but stands for Joint European Disruptive Initiative. A special welcome also to Sophie-Charlotte Fischer, who is working on her PhD at the Center for Security Studies at ETH. She specializes in the governance of dual-use technologies. This is the more tricky part that I was talking about before. And for example, strategic implications for new weapons systems. I'm happy now to hand over to Chris Luebkeman, our, how should I say, dompter for tonight. He will guide us through the discussion. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Joel. Thank you. Thank you so much. Is my microphone working? Can you hear me okay in the back? Excellent. Okay, I'm going to put this to the side. We have a few chairs up here. If anyone wants to get up before it gets really embarrassing to walk up. There's three going once. There you go. Come on, going twice. There you go. Going twice. We got one more. One more. No buyers, no sellers. I'm not a good auctioneer. That's okay. All right. So AI is everywhere in the news today. How many of you read an article or have heard about AI this week? Anybody in here? How many are not listening to what I'm saying? Okay, there we go. The rest of you guys up here. That's all right. You can do that. So what is it? How is it going to change the way we research, the way we work, the way we design? This is in our design pavilion. So I got a question for you to kick off. Who thinks that AI is going to help you in your personal life? Hand up. Who's not so sure if AI is going to help you? All right, you've got 2, 3 folks. You don't have Netflix. That's cool. Okay, how about your professional lives? How many of you think it's going to impact your professional life? How many of them not quite so sure about it yet? Only one, he's scratching his chin. That's not really a real answer. Okay, are we ready for it? That's the question for us. Are we ready for it, and are you ready for it? Our panel certainly is. These are the people to ask. And we've already heard some of the introductions. I was very impressed by Eric's homepage, which is a veritable library for continuing education on AI and the future. If you go to it, you know, you're gone for about an hour and a half. Marc has a foot in two camps, both in corporate and academic research. Interesting how to bridge those two worlds and where that's going to head. André, a pilot, and has flown through the stellar career of investment in many parts of the world, trying to make sure that Europe is at the forefront, and we'll hear more about JEDI. And Sophie, a doctoral candidate at the Center for Security Studies at DHH. And I'm really interested to hear what she's into, especially tonight, is AI and international relations and securitization and control of AI and the role of the private sector in the development and governance of AI. So what we're going to do is each one's going to give us about 3-minute statement or sort of a starter for 10. You could say a starter for 3. I'm going to have a couple follow-up questions, and then it's going to be open for you. And what I'm going to do is take questions from the floor, maybe 2, 3 questions. So be listening and be ready with some questions to ask. So that makes sense. So what works for me is heads. All you have to do is do a heads when I ask a question. Yeah? Does that work, everybody? Okay. And we were going to end at 7:05. My train was 5 minutes late getting to Davos, so I'm giving myself 5-minute SBB time here now. Sophie, tell us.
Sure, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm very glad to be here, and I'm already looking forward to your question and the discussion afterwards. I would like to focus in my very brief input on one central question. And this question is, given that AI research has been going on for quite a long time, actually for several decades, and even has been sponsored by states, how is it possible that it has only very recently become a subject of global politics, and why is this the case? Now, one answer to the why question is certainly technical. So the politicization of artificial intelligence is a response to critical technical improvements that have been happening over the past 5 to 10 years. And there are 3 central factors, the combination of these 3 factors, which have enabled these improvements. And this is, first of all, the availability of large data sets through a lot of the applications that we're using in our daily lives from our smartphones and also on the internet. Then the improvements of deep learning algorithms. And the combination of these factors have paved the way for a number of new application areas. And although the full potential of AI has yet to be revealed, its enabling character, which is often likened to electricity, promises huge economic advantages and also military advantage to those states pursuing it. So what we've basically seen is since 2016, when the outgoing Obama administration have published 3 papers that were trying to grapple with the implications of artificial intelligence, the risks and the benefits, is that we've basically seen a domino effect. A large number of countries who published AI strategies and tried to think about how they can gain a leading spot in this field. And there are certainly a number of very, very positive implications of these trends and a lot of benefits to tackle global challenges. But I would also argue that there are a number of challenges that are emerging from these technological developments that are happening in the sphere of AI on the international stage. And let me just briefly name 3. One trend that we can start to observe is something that I would call AI nationalism. And what I mean by that is that because states perceive artificial intelligence increasingly as a strategic resource, they're trying to constrain the diffusion of these technologies beyond their borders. So the United States, for example, is currently contemplating whether they want to expand their control for export controls to cover a number of AI technologies as well. What this would mean is that, of course, we would see constraints on international trade when it comes to AI and also on the exchange of researchers. And what might seem as a logical strategy for states in the first place might actually backfire and have reverse consequences. Because of the globalized nature of this industry and also of this academic field, states could harm, through these kind of measures, the innovation base that they try to protect in the first place. Now, the second implication that I would like to point out is that we have to be careful that we don't see a widening gap of inequality between states and a division between what I would call the AI haves and the AI have-nots. Because, of course, there are a number of states, such as the United States and also China, which have very special resources in this field. But then there are other states which don't have these resources. So we have to make sure that also these states that I would call the have-nots can benefit from these developments. I close. What I would like to conclude is that AI has not only rapidly taken or entered the stage of global politics, it will also require policymakers around the world to counteract these tendencies that I've just started to outline and navigate the space not only for the national benefit, but also for the global good.
That's great. Sophie, let's give her a hand. Thank you very much. Really good. That way, I can make sure everyone's still alive in the room. Okay, so we've got 3 factors: availability, improvement of algorithms, and what was the third?
The data sets.
Data sets. Okay. So, Maestro?
Okay.
Marc?
So I'll tell you a little bit about my background, which is research, doing research in computer vision, which has been actually one of the recent areas where AI is really, or a lot of the recent development with deep learning and so on, has really had this rebirth in a sense. This is indeed because of data sets and then compute capabilities, this coming together, opening up and showing that it went way beyond the state of the art relatively easily by leveraging these techniques. That the techniques themselves were actually quite old. But by revisiting those, I think what's important to understand is that AI is not, it has to be understand what it is at this point. AI is still far from being a real intelligence in the sense that people understand intelligence. However, it's very powerful machines to essentially, given a pattern, to from that pattern get an answer. In particular, if you feed it with a lot of examples of these, input and then expected output answer, it's very good at memorizing that, very good at reproducing that. In a sense, you could call AI mostly an idiot savant at this point, in many cases. So does that mean that there's no worries about AI taking over or this kind of situation? I think there are a lot of worries about AI today, not in the sense of having an intelligence emerge and take over or so, but in the sense of having that technology enable things like recognizing faces, which can be very useful in some situations, but also has big impact on society depending on how this gets deployed. Also, which data you feed in, you essentially will have the machines reproduce the answers that you feed in the beginning. So it's not going to invent new answers typically. Actually, if it invents new answers, if you present it with something you haven't presented before, all bets are off, and it could actually come up with really silly answers. So what's still interesting about AI is that for specific questions, it's very, very good at answering those questions and at producing answers in a very efficient way, in very powerful way, can assist us. So what I'm really excited about, so I work, besides doing computer vision at Microsoft, I work on HoloLens, which is a device that's essentially there to, it's for augmented reality, it's meant to augment a person, to help a person, literally, our mission statement is to empower people to achieve more. And that's really what HoloLens is about. It's a device that you put on your head that's stuffed with AI capabilities of recognizing what's in front of you, tracking your position through the world, being able to answer questions for you and help you, keep track of the things you have to do and so on. Now, we're only at the beginning of this, but essentially there we can have a device that can really help you. In many cases, AI is very complementary to our natural intelligence, and so can really help us in cases that are hard for us, really help us, and then we can, in other ways, very much complement that. So as a team of having AI, or as my former colleague at UNC, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Fred Brooks, was often saying he preferred much more intelligence augmentation to artificial intelligence. And I think in many ways, we can leverage AI advances also to really help people achieve more, as opposed to try to replace them.
Perfect place to pause. Intelligent augmentation instead of artificial intelligence. André, you want to pick up on that? And Eric, you're gonna be the wrap up. You can do it. I know you can.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. So just to give you a bit of background, so I have three liabilities being in this room. I'm not an ETH Zurich alumni. I'm not Swiss, and I'm an aerospace engineer. So that makes a lot of. So I'm not a computer scientist. Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. Really, you're welcome.
So
really
just to give you the perspective of which I'm talking to, I was 15 years for 15 years VC, venture capitalist, mostly in technology firm. Last year, or 2 years ago now, we changed presidents in France, so I joined the government. I advised the defense minister on many topics, European defense, but also innovation. And now what I'm building for this is a European version of DARPA. So basically an agency for disruptive innovation. And why do we do that? For three reasons. One is there is a lot of discourse in Europe about we are not as good as US or China to build unicorns, but we are still very good at fundamental research. I'm very sure that's the case at ETH. But when you look at the last NIMS Congress, which was 2 months ago in Montreal, when you look at the number of papers published, that's the Congress on basically the AI Congress, 86% of the papers were of American origin, of which approximately a quarter comes from Google alone. So, sorry. I'm sure Microsoft is big too. And 7% out of the EU 28. You realize I've been politically correct. I've not mentioned how much comes from Switzerland. But basically, this idea of saying, yes, we still have that, even this is fading. The second thing is 10 years ago, it was okay to be number 2. And Apple is a good case in itself. The iPhone was not the first smartphone to be in. Today, we all know that increasingly we are in a winners-takes-all world, where the margins are concentrating because of network effects, globalization, etc. So the disruptive innovation, which is a little bit of political buzzword right now, is not anymore a luxury. It's really a must. And probably even more for the Europeans who have been at the forefront, probably a little bit lagging in the last acceleration for the last 10, 15 years. So these two reasons makes us think we absolutely, and the third reason we do that, you hear all the discussion about, banning Huawei or taxing the big platforms. We probably need to do that a bit more because we've been very naive in Europe about it. But it's not a strategy. It's defensive. It's not something which is going to enthusiasm, especially the younger generation. It's much more interesting to say, how can we use this technological acceleration to not just follow and try to build the Googles, the Microsofts of this world, but to invent the next big thing. And for this, we need disruptive thinking. And what we have put in place right now is an agency that will launch very large challenges, so grand technical challenges, areas which are too risky or too long-term for the private sector, but with 3 European characteristics. One, we don't do it in a defense-driven world. By the way, it's no such thing as dual use anymore. I mean, that's my intimate belief. Remember, drones was purely military. Now most of the applications will be in the civilian agriculture side. Right now, when you look at how massively multiplayer video games have an impact on the way of simulating a battlefield, they are much better than any kind of proprietary. So that's point number 1, is we want to do something which is purpose-driven. So this DARPA, which is called JEDI, is going to invest on 4 big missions: climate change and energy, healthcare, human-centric digital transition, and I'm with you, we can elaborate on this, augmentation, and new frontiers, mainly space and oceans. And the second thing, and that is getting a little bit of nervousness, especially in Brussels, I'm trying to shorten that, but I think that's an important point, is we build that with the European countries who want to move first. So initially it was French-German, but we said, we need to have the Swiss in, and we were very happy that since last year ETH was very active. People in Brussels are sometimes a little bit worried about that, but we think it would be just so stupid and unpragmatic not to have the talent that we have here. And the third thing, which is even more complicated to get through the administration, is to say, if we rely on the traditional ministries in Paris, in Berlin, in Brussels to be super agile, to be bold, to put 20, 30 million euro grants per project and to decide in 10 weeks like DARPA does, and be able to cut projects when they don't deliver, it's not going to happen. So if you remember Machiavelli's famous words, I mean, he was in a dictatorship, so he could do much better things than we do. He said, you cannot change an administration. Start it from the outside, so it's an ecosystem-driven initiative, and with the objective that in 1, 2, or 3 years, it becomes a fully integrated government agency. So that's what JEDI is.
Thank you, André. JEDI would be very proud. Now, last but not least, bring it man-machine, artificial intelligence. Eric, what do we need to be thinking about?
So first of all, it's an honor to be here, and thanks for inviting me to sit on the panel with our guests here. I do think that, and I'll agree that we're at an inflection point in technologies that I would say read on human intellect. That's why they're so interesting to people. Whenever we've made a push forward in technologies that seem like human thinking, the population generally gets very excited about this. It's happened before in the mid-'80s at the last AI hype cycle. I think now there's even more reason for it. And even if we do have a chilling, when some of the expectations might not be reached in a few years, I keep on telling my colleagues there'll still be enough warm cinders in the fireplace this time. You can blow a little bit and keep things moving and sparking. So yes, data, computation, not so much the algorithms. The algorithms being used were invented in the late 80s. We discovered that they were famished for data and computation. And we started feeding them actually at Microsoft Research in 2009, and we saw big pops, ran a workshop, and the rest is history when it comes to deep neural networks. We're in a university setting and in a Microsoft research setting, which is an open research lab, talk about research challenges. My first comment is, if you were to tell Marvin Minsky and Herb Simon and others, founders of artificial intelligence, using that phrase in the 1950s, hey, it's 2020, just about, here's what we have, they would be utterly stunned at the slow progress. We have gone almost nowhere. We have pattern recognizers and classifiers. So what's the research path forward? Well, first of all, we have to really understand the principles of intelligence and push towards more general artificial intelligence. We have very little understanding of many of the deepest mysteries of human intellect. How do human beings learn in the wild without labeled data? How do they learn and build a massive fund of common sense knowledge? How do they do so many things generally and generalize from one task to another? We have no idea. We're asking these questions in our labs now, in our research right now, and we don't want to get carried away by some progress on what some people view as function learners, that you feed a lot of data to, and they spit back functions, even if they can now enable systems to see better, more like humans in terms of capabilities, and to hear better. There's a jury is out kind of situation. We say the jury is out. We don't know the answer to this. Is the recent leap forward kind of like the monkey running into the top of the tree, thinking he or she is getting closer to the moon? Or is it on a path to more general intelligence? We don't know the answer to that question. I happen to think we're getting closer because we might find out that we can generalize pattern recognition in a number of ways that give us new insights. So that's the first pillar of research. Second pillar of important research, mastering human-AI collaboration. It's going to be critical. We're building systems that will be working with people, be part of workflows, some that are traditional, that already exist, some that will become new workflows. We have to build systems that understand human cognition very deeply and that work in a mix of initiatives with people in complementing our own abilities and skills as individuals and as organizations. And the third area of research, and by the way, I'm going to make a comment that the civilizations, the cultures, European culture, JEDI, that master all three will make it big. Not just the first, not second. The third one is really addressing key concerns and opportunities arising on the influences of AI on people and society. Again, and it's a technical and a socio-technical set of issues. Number one, on the opportunities, so much we can do with AI to address climate and other challenge problems we have right now. Running accelerators, where's our president here? There, saving energy, but even helping us to understand better what's going on with particle physics and quantum mechanics more generally. Just to wrap up quickly here, on the concern side, we have issues with this idea of understanding capabilities and blind spots in our systems. If you want to read about one of these blind spots, look my name up and say Tesla and read about my accident in a Wired article, my Tesla accident. Secondly, values. Our systems align with human values, individuals and groups and culture. And third, this idea of misuse. There's an incredible, these are beautiful tools, but they're incredible weapons, and they can be weaponized to understand how to persuade people in interesting ways, to grab our attention and hold it with machine learning and reasoning, to keep us stuck to our services in ways that we might not even understand, and to actually be used even inadvertently to do human rights incursions and violations.
Awesome. Thank you. Anyone have any questions yet? I just want to, there's two, and we're going to need more than that. So you guys are going to have to think of some more questions. I'm going to ask you one as a panel. There's a lot of talk about, a lot of fear about this. There's a fear not necessarily in this room, but there's a fear in the air. Is that founded, grounded? Yes, no?
I mean, it's completely founded. That's the only thing where I would disagree. I'm not so sure that the majority of the population, I mean, I guess for 70, 80 is excited about it. I think for 70, 80% of the population, if you talk right now, and that's why I'm super against these strategies about AI or cyber, because these are tools. And what we need is to turn technology, and not just say tech for good, because that's a buzzword, but if we don't show that it has a societal impact, I mean, I would be a taxi driver. I know that Uber and Waze, I'm disappearing in 5 years. I'm a bank clerk. I disappear in 5 years.
That's the fourth IR.
So we need to make sure that people understand that this is helping societal goods.
So let's talk just to human and the human interface with this, isn't it? Like augmentation. We're looking at how we augment humanity in a way. Work on that a little bit.
And this is the notion.
And then I'm going to come to you all.
So I do think that that these technologies, like other aspects of computing and networking and communications and automation more generally, will continue, as it's been for hundreds of years, have a rolling effect on the distribution and nature of our work and what people do. Not necessarily a bad thing, but changing jobs, creating new kinds of jobs, new kinds of roles. There's just a beautiful prospect of these systems extending people in interesting ways. And it's not like you say, we've discovered that radiology will go away because we now have systems that can see what radiologists see. A radiologist's job is hundreds of decisions, not just recognizing what's on a film. And so how do you inject in a beautiful way that complements radiologists and maybe changes their job for the better, more patient care, more manipulation, interventional medicine, in an elegant way versus thinking about replacing jobs?
Yeah. And so it's interesting, tomorrow morning here we're having a dialogue on the future of education.
Yeah.
And it's what needs to be happening in institutions of higher education about the future and how we need to be thinking about this evolution as well. So that's quite intriguing. Any other comments on the human? Then I'm going to come back to I had two hands. Any other hand? But now we have three. So now we have three, so we can start with you all. So we're going to take all three questions, and then probably you can just scream them, and then we're going to hear them. This is a very hellhurtig room. 1, 2, 3. Go ahead.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Menno Bart. I'm with the Adecco Group. My question is, indeed, many of the fears about AI might be warranted to a certain degree, but my question is, how unique are those fears to AI specifically? And aren't they more fears about any new technological development that we've seen for hundreds of years already?
Great question. We're going to hold on that one, and we got the person in the back right there, and then you. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
Sure. My name is Brian Tolby. I run an AI company. There's been a lot of chatter. You mentioned taxi drivers who are going to lose their job, possibly radiologists, and we know confidence in lawyers are going to be coming down the line as well. There's a lot of different prognostications of 800 million jobs globally, 2 billion jobs globally that are going to be replaced by AI. What's your perspective on what the future of work is going to look like? Are we able to create new jobs and retrain the population fast enough? And if so, what do you think are the methodologies in order to do that?
All right. That's the second question. That's another
We were caching questions.
easy question. Yeah, this is what Davos is about. Easy questions. Yeah. How are we going to change the world? Okay, yes, sir. And then the next, you three will be the next round. Okay, yes, sir.
So my name is Philippe Mania. I represent a startup called Huawei. I have simple and easy questions. It's related to Huawei on all the problems related to the 5G. So my question is, with 5G, is it more dangerous than with traditional technologies like email, social network, and so on? My second question is it justified to worry
Just get one.
specifically because Huawei is Chinese, or should we worry equally when it comes from the USA? On the third sub-question,
No, sorry, sir. you pushed me one. I gotta let you get through with that one. That's it. Don't say it.
Past my cognitive.
That was well done. I can't keep that many. We got 3 questions on the floor. How unique are these fears to this new tech? The future of work. What are we going to do? And is 5G more dangerous? Who wants to pick one up?
I was going to make a comment. I have this great picture I captured from a museum of a plaque that was over hotel room doors in late 19th century that says something like, and it's beautiful, it says, "Do not try to light the lamps. They're electric. Electricity will not harm you or interfere with your sleep." You know, and it's a sign to try to calm fears about this idea of an electric lamp. Just touch the button. You can imagine this was a very strange thing at the time, and people didn't know if this would harm them or not, a harmful thing. There's a kind of also this idea of a metaphor. I've heard that in Japan, where spirits mythologically are good, they're ancient, wise souls of the past coming back to help people, ghosts are good things. AI is invited in that spirit, in the notion of a good, robots are agents, they resonate with the deep mythology of Japanese culture as good. We come from the culture of Frankenstein. You shouldn't mess with human intellect. It's not if you mess with it, it'll come and destroy us. That's in our mythology. I believe that the archetypes go deeper than just the intellectual layer.
Okay,
maybe to complement just on this uniqueness, I'm going to be in a difficult role of saying this time it's different, and you know it's always dangerous to say that. But let's see what really fundamentally we achieve with AI is this dream of humanity to predict the future, basically making better decisions. And so that's why I think there is a uniqueness and a unique fear of it, is because we are all transactional in everything we do. We take decisions all the time, by driving, by working, by interacting, etc. If there is something else which can do it, and which can even do it better than us, even worse, we don't understand why today, and today it's the first time in, I think, science history where basically IT is before math. I mean, we don't understand yet why actually empirically it makes better decisions. So that's why I think it's really different, and there's a uniqueness on that.
I'm going to take a poll of the room. This is always dangerous since we know the wisdom of the crowds, and we trust that implicitly. How many of you are more on Eric's side, or this is just another wave, get over it, let's go? How many kind of with that? All right. And how many are on André's side, where this is fundamentally different, wake up? Okay, so it's about 80 or 70-30 approximately in the room.
Yeah, I'll say I think it's a bit of both, I would say.
Yeah.
I think I'll...
wait.
It's 70-30.
Wait,
I'm Belgian, actually.
He's from the Netherlands, right? Where were you from?
Belgium.
Belgique, okay. Well,
yes, we also do compromise and everything.
They're very good at it.
So I think it's different because it goes further than before. Before it was more mechanic. It was more like replacing partially animals with machines and also partially people. But it was seen as there was still a big gap to people. Now, because it's really things that are going on with our brain, and this is what we see as unique to ourselves, it is threatening people. People feel it feels very different, I think. So I think it truly feels different. In the end, I think the problem, and I think with every resolution like this, it always felt different actually than before. And so this time also
Yeah,
it feels different. It of course goes further than the previous ones. I think in particular, it's very hard, and this was at every time, it's very hard to look beyond, because those new jobs and those new opportunities that come, they will only show up, they will only become clear to us once things have been disrupted.
Hard to imagine.
You have to disrupt first to see then what complements it and what comes beyond it.
Right.
You know, the person repairing a tractor was obviously not needed before there were tractors. So, you know.
Okay,
Can I make just a quick call to the room? What we need, by the way, I'm using that also for our initiative, is we need science fiction. I mean, think about it, how difficult it is for us. I mean, cognitive science showed that beyond 5 years, we are very linear in our thinking. So being able to imagine that a phone does not look like a phone, that like a car is not looking like a car. Even Tesla today is actually very traditional. It's 4 wheels, it still have a big... We need to imagine these, and there we could try to be more utopian than dystopian. What worries me today is that science fiction has been replaced by fiction, which is more like either an idealist past or a past that never existed. We need to find again this kind of desirable future.
One thing that I ask some people I work with is to just imagine it's 30 years from now, what's surprised us about progress? Good and bad. I mean, you know, it might be really disappointing 30 years from now to see we're just with classifiers and vision systems, we haven't really figured things out yet. But you can imagine we can list the kinds of things that might surprise us. Because I believe, deep in my heart, we will be surprised.
Okay, and on that note, we're going to move to the next set of questions. So, okay, no one want to do, we had 3 right here. Sorry, guys. Okay, 1. Go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
Why is Facebook hiring thousands of people to review videos of the headings and filter them out? Isn't that a machine task? And why is it so still difficult, it seems?
Why is Facebook did everyone hear the question? Why is Facebook hiring lots and lots of folks to review videos now? And wouldn't this be an obvious thing for machine learning or to actually take on? Okay, that's a good one. Yes, sir? And then there's another one there.
Yes, my name is Daniel Stauffacher from ICT for Peace Foundation. Great panel. I was particularly interested in, thank you for bringing up the governance question. And so what I'm seeing here is really that governments are behind the curve. And as we know, code is law. They will have to catch up at some point. But at the moment, it's all driven by companies.
Yeah.
Even the ethical questions or the human-centric approaches is even companies do ethical standards or outsource this to institutions, which we heard now Facebook did through the German.
Great question. Okay, now take that third one. There was a woman back here. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I would love to hear more of the female voice on stage.
Yeah.
And second, my question is, goes into the same direction. So you just said we will be surprised. There is an option that democracy is at stake because we might be surprised and people will be so in fear and so confused that they will look for a strong leader, as we see on some other parts of the world, and that leader might not be taking the best decisions out of lack of positive imagination. So how can we as entrepreneurs and scientists involve into politics and help them, instead of just sitting here believing in entrepreneurial power, as we all do, which is good, but which is possibly not enough?
Okay, thank you very much. Got 3 questions. I'm going to take these 3, and then we'll come back. So, Facebook, governance and ethics.
I'll answer very quickly the Facebook.
Pass to our
and then Sophie's going to answer all 3 of them for us, all right?
Thank you for making that point, by the way.
That's great. I appreciate that, too.
I'll answer the question from a female person in the room first. So the Facebook question is actually quite easy. It's because you need a ton of data to be able to have an algorithm answer that question. So what they're doing is they're having people label this and answer and figure out and generate positive and negative examples so that their algorithms can train this. Once this is done, they'll be able to do this automatically.
Very good. Okay, Sophie.
Yes.
Government's behind the curve.
Yeah, this is actually very true. And I think you raised a very important question when it comes to understanding how this governance space is evolving and also some of the challenges that come with it. So what we see, as you pointed to, is that companies are really spearheading this development and governments are far behind the curve, not only when it comes to funding research in the space, but also really, I would say, understanding what is going on, which is necessary to make decisions about how to regulate the space and how to act. So what I think is crucial is to really look at fora for where governments can engage together with companies and, of course, also researchers from universities and deliberate together and identify what are really the crucial issues at stake that require regulation and how can we, together develop these kind of regulations. Because in the end, of course, for the implementation of these kind of regulations, again, companies will be very, very important. And I think this also relates to the second question. I think for entrepreneurs, there are a lot of different fora through which you can help. And governments are certainly a bit late in this case, but we already see a lot of initiatives, not only on a governmental level, but also on a supranational level. For example, the EU currently has a call out for its ethics regulation when it comes to trustworthy and AI, and they invite comments from the public when it comes to these kinds of regulations. So I can only encourage all of you who really have deep knowledge about the technology to comment on these kind of guidelines and really have an impact on where this is going.
So let me just pause for just a second. You're a political scientist.
Yes.
And you're at the ETH.
Yes.
Does what you just discussed have something to do with why you joined the ETH?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I think to me, I would actually join what André has just said. I think AI, beyond what it can do technically, will have large societal and political implications. But in order to make sense of these implications, as a political scientist, you of course need a certain understanding of the technological developments. And I mean, ETH is certainly one of the best institutions in the world when it comes to this kind of research, and then also the larger ecosystem in Zurich, in which it is embedded with companies such as Microsoft. So it's a great spot also for political scientists to become a bridge builder between these two fields.
Fantastic.
I'll make this comment also, and thanks for your question. I think given where we are, given the fast pace of, if not the science, the implementations and the excitement about implementing the technologies in many domains, that we need to have corporate responsibility as well as government responsibility, and then multi-party stakeholder groups thinking through deeply implications. I think we have to always start somewhere, and at companies, it's most easy to start with cases, specifics, so you understand. It's hard to make general statements about regulating this blue-green gas called AI. But if you say, what about face recognition? What does that mean for human rights, for our freedom of expression and our freedom of assembly? And if Microsoft, for example, recognizes that this is a concern, given our own commitments as a company to human rights, it's our responsibility to write down how the technology works, why we think it's a threat, and then to work with legislation to put into place laws. Brad Smith this morning, our president, made a comment in a panel we had on face recognition. We want to see a law in 2019 in the United States on face recognition, in particular on its use by governments.
Just to build on that and to be much harsher than you've been, and completely agree with you on the governments. I mean, I'm not sure governments understand that the technology development we have is life or death threatening for our systems. You talked about face recognition. The way face recognition goes in China right now is completely changing the famous social contract between the state and the individual. Look at how our elections are being hacked increasingly by cyber, and how now social media, we could see that with the Gilets jaunes again in the last 3 months in France, is completely, basically demonetizing the power of the contradictory debate, which is at the core of our democracies. If there's fake news everywhere, we will not rely on the debate anymore, and we're cooked, it's done. So if they don't react, and the second thing, I think there's a huge responsibility, especially in Europe. Sorry, I'm going to be very harsh on that, but are there many Germans in the room? Okay, when you hear Germany doing its AI strategy and calling that made in Germany, it's as ridiculous as when you see Great Britain great for trade, that's like we all saw on the Belvedere. I mean, don't they realize the irony in an area where scale is everything? That everybody goes its own way, I mean, I think remember what the head of Google, the former head of Google said about AI. It's a two-sided coin, the US and the Chinese one. Europe disappeared. I cannot hear that. We need to react on this.
Okay, deep breath. Whew, there we go. All right.
Not so much Europe. So everybody.
Democracies.
That sounds like an awesome conversation to continue with wine in about 5 minutes. Then we're going to. We have time for perhaps 2 more questions. You've been very patient. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Wolfgang. I represent some other labs. I guess my question has two dimensions, a political and a technical, and I'm framing it very openly. What's the future or existing relationship between AI and decentralization?
Okay, so the question is, what's the existing or future relationship between AI and decentralization? All right, that's the first question. And the second question, yes, ma'am.
Hello, Simon Bernal. I think we've touched upon this increasing importance of the human-AI interaction and the human factor. And I guess one thing I'm wondering about is, so often you see a lot of technologists working on this, and whose job is it to figure out this human piece? Who do you think should be working on that? And how are we going to encourage that we have enough of that side represented in the discourse?
Okay, 2 very good questions.
So we have the rise of a rich interdisciplinary area of human-AI collaboration and interaction, HAIC. And we're seeing teams at Microsoft Research working with universities right now on designing new guidelines and principles, doing experiments. I've always viewed HCI and AI as a rich intersecting area, and I've always viewed, from the point of view of AI, HCI as a grand AI challenge. It's harder to predict and help complement human beings than come up with a chess move.
All right.
The question on decentralization, and maybe we didn't completely answer on the question on the political aspect of it. I love the question because, I mean, we live in a world where we need probably vision, and we need to, in our organizations, in government, even in the military, a leader who is authoritarian and top-down survives 3 months, that's it, even in these kind of situations. So I think you're completely right. I think it's a huge opportunity for actually, focusing everything at every level on what is important. You could imagine states focusing on education, on innovation, and leaving these kind of decentralized. I mean, some people go even further and say with AI and probably also blockchain, why do we have leaders who are elected for 5 years? 5 years is too little for education, and it's way too long for many other decisions like innovation. So maybe this technology can allow us to have basically differentiated leadership, where you don't have these kind of, it's very, obviously it's a little bit iconoclast, but I think we need to, if we show that that is actually bringing more power, empowerment to the citizen, then we will go beyond the dystopia. I think that's a great opportunity.
Okay, that's one reply. Sophie?
I would just like to add one point to the second question. I think one very positive development is that you see at a lot of universities that technical courses of studies are increasingly complemented by courses in ethics, for example, and in sociology. And I think this is a very, very important condition for also making people who will mainly work on the technology afterwards more aware of the implications that this will have for the human-machine relationship.
Marc, you?
Yes, I think for the issue with decentralization, I think is that what we've seen now is the lack of trust. So like decentralization without building up strong trust, understanding how to pass trust and how to share trust, that is a big problem. And I think that's like a big problem we've seen with politics and so on now being influenced by social networks where, fake news and so on was let loose. I think to answer also maybe briefly the second question, I think there's also an interesting opportunity, or at least our ambition with some of the mixed reality that we're looking at with devices like HoloLens and so on, is actually to, as much as possible, and I think this is something that's new and unique, you needed to, in the past, always have to learn how to use a machine. It was always clumsy and was determined by form and by other things how you could use a machine. I think now with AI, actually, we can really bring in and essentially make you interface with information, make you interface with the digital world by just piggybacking and leveraging our own, having lived in the world, this 3D physical world for our whole life and having learned how to manipulate it and how to access it, we can essentially make the access to digital information as much as possible piggyback on that, and so make it much simpler, much more intuitive and natural by essentially building, leveraging AI technology to make that interface as natural and intuitive as possible, so that there's zero learning curve, ideally.
Okay, we don't have no more questions, except one for the panel. And I'm going to take your question, which you posed, and throw it back at you. Don't you hate that?
No.
What surprised you? Let's step out to 2030. We've been focusing on the UN SDG goals, all 17. We're getting closer and closer, right? We've been working on that, dedicating ourselves to that. And you're looking back, and we're sitting on a panel here again in 2030, all in good health. What has surprised you most about artificial intelligence and humans and that interface? And Sophie, you're going to get the last word.
Okay.
Who has a birthday in January, February, March, April? No. Marc, what surprised you?
Well, I think maybe not surprise me, but what I expect is that it will be interesting. I think it will be more the other way around. I think by then we will have completely forgotten how we could live without a continuous full access to, or be able to query any information, anything, all the time, even beyond a phone. Essentially, it's just there. Like maybe it's something like this, or maybe it's like contact lenses or so. But essentially, we'll just be able to have answers to any question and complicated questions. With full knowledge of information, we'll get that, and we'll wonder, as we wonder now, about 20 years ago, how we kind of managed, to move around the world without our devices. It will be something similar, and again, we'll be completely puzzled how we were able to do it. So it's a reverse surprise, I think.
Excellent. André? You're looking back.
I'm looking positively back.
Good, like that. Yep.
I will be very positively surprised that after the backlash that we begin to feel, there was this excitement about the internet allowing to connect everybody, and then we realized that things like Facebook actually give you some kind of a tunnel vision, that there will be a lot of, not just technological, but innovation, I think, a huge role to play, that we will have found a way to, and I don't know how, to use data sets and to avoid reverse engineering. So we use the data sets for the AI, but we will keep our privacy. We will be able to ensure security of public spaces, but without going into an Orwellian state like China is a bit becoming. We will have an opportunity to not say, oh my God, there are biases, so we cannot use this AI. We will have a way to unlearn AI. And as you know, this is today a frontier. We don't know once a biased data set has been fed into an AI, we need to throw it away and start again. So I will see positively that we were able to reconnect and regain the trust. And maybe one other thing I will be positively seeing is that politicians, which is probably, please don't quote that back in Paris, but I was amazed to see how political decisions are made on very little information. Probably if there's one area to disrupt, it's this. Look at how little.
So you're going to be surprised. You're going to be surprised at how good the decisions were made.
Exactly. We will use AI not to be surprised by movements, but to anticipate and understand. That will be a good utopian future.
I like the second one a little bit more than the first one. Like to be able to understand them better. Okay. Thanks, André. Eric?
One of the big surprises in 2030, looking back, will be how little progress we've made on the foundations of intelligence, of understanding it. I think that'll be kind of a letdown. The other surprise will be how similar most of the world looks in 2030. However, there'll be a sub-surprise is that certain pockets will change dramatically. One of them will be transportation. So we'll have kind of cities that look kind of similar, but there'll be whole regions, for example, closed to human-driven traffic. There'll be public microtransit, very fast-paced. Pockets of these big advances jumping forward in certain sectors will stand out as pockets of surprise in what relatively seems like the same world.
Great, thank you. And last.
I will close on an optimistic note,
Yes.
a general one. I think, especially in Europe, societies have the tendency to always be very concerned when it comes to new technologies. I think this is certainly true, and we might see a different picture about that, for example, in Asia. But then I think also societies have the capability, they have the ability to be increasingly and amazingly adaptive when it comes to new technological changes. And I think by the time that people will have realized that there are also very positive developments when it comes to AI applications, they will adapt quite smoothly to it and actually enjoy a lot of the benefits that come from these technologies. I hope.
And on that note, before we all disappear, first, three things. First of all, thank you, ETH Zurich, Joel, for welcoming us, ETH Global for helping put all this together, for you for choosing to be here tonight. Here, there's always too many things to go do, and we truly, really are grateful that you have chosen to come here. And to our amazingly fantastic panel, we could have gone on for 2 hours instead of 1 or 2 minutes each. So thank you all so very, very much. You were brilliant. So thank you.